أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا محمد وآله الطاهرين. Assalamu alaikum everyone. We continue with verse number 14 of Surah Al-Fajr. إن ربك لبالمرصاد. If you remember, the previous verses talked about the consequences that great civilizations like Egypt and the civilization of Ad and Thamud met because of their undue behavior and undue use of power. And then Allah said that, have you not considered what we did to them? And because they spread corruption on the earth, they did actually go beyond the limits of humanity. And then this is a very general statement by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna rabbaka labil mirsad. Indeed, your Lord is in ambush. Your Lord is in ambush means that He is always watching. He is always seeing how the situation is going with people. And not only in this world, even in the next world, He's in ambush for those who have committed crimes and spread corruption. Now, there's one very interesting thing in this verse, which has been alluded to by Allama Tabatabai in Al-Mizan, and that is the usage of the term Rabbak, Inna Rabbaka labil mirsad, your Lord. You know, Rabb is someone who cherishes, someone who creates, sustains, cherishes, gives, forgives, and all these things. And suddenly He comes out as someone who's in ambush and punishes. And this is something for us to know, that this and making people to meet the consequences of their actions is also one of the aspects of rububiyyah of Allah. He has to look after human race. And if in human race there are people who move out of the boundaries and limits, then of course the Rabb is there to cut it off, to stop it. And this is one of the aspects of rububiyyah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Inna rabbaka labil mirsad. Mirsad is translated as ambush. And when it says Inna rabbaka labil mirsad, means that this is not only something which happens to the past generations, to the past nations. It is also there forever. And Allah is always there to stop people from undue corruption, excessive oppression. Allah will stop them. However, as we said last week, what is called adabul istisal, the uprooting of a nation, is not there anymore, because that comes only after a prophet comes, shows the miracle, and the miracle is rejected by people. However, that doesn't mean that Allah is not in charge anymore. That doesn't mean that Allah would not correct, would not somehow give the balancing effect to the situation on the earth. Now, about Mirsad, we have many narrations about which is related to the Day of Judgment, because there is one very important stage on the Day of Judgment, on Sirat, that's a sort of link which links people to paradise but goes over the hell. Whatever it means, we don't want to enter into discussion about what Sirat is, that there is a position there as well which is called Mirsad. And that is God is in ambush, and that ambush is for those who have wronged others. There's one hadith from Imam Ja'far al-Sadiq alayhi salam, who said, إنه قال المرصاد قنطرة على الصراط لا يجوزها عبد بمظلمة عبد. Mirsad is one station on Sirat. Sirat is a sort of bridge which makes possible for people to pass through over it to paradise. and then they have to pass through stages there so that the undue impurity which would hinder people to enter paradise is removed from them. Now, he said that there is one station on Sirat which is like this: لا يجوزها عبد بمظلمة عبد. No servant, no human would pass it while there is oppression, while he has wronged someone else, and that wrong and oppression is still with him. It's not possible. And then if he can actually compensate, pay back to the person who's wronged with their hasanat, with his hasanat, something he has to pay back there before being able to move forward. And for example, he has lots of charities, the sawab of that is there, the other form, the resurrection form of it is there. He has to give it to the one who's wrong and then can pass. And if he doesn't have anything to pay, then of course he will be in real drastic trouble. Now, about this Sirat, of course, when we say, just forgot to say one thing, because people sometimes, when Allah says, Inna rabbaka labil mirsad, God is in the position of ambush, then people think that God is actually watching, staying there and watching. And that's why when Imam Ali alayhi salam was asked about where was our Lord before he created heaven and the earth, if he is not in the heavens and the earth, so where is he? Before he created, where was he? He said, فَقَالَ أَيْنَ سُؤَالٌ عَنْ مَكَانٍ. When you say where, you are asking about place. And Allah is the creator of place, has no place. So when we say Allah is in ambush, it's a metaphorical form of statement that Allah is watching. He is very cautious about justice to be done. He considers it seriously that justice should be done. And when this happens individually, individuals are put on stage, but when are put on spot. But when this is done by a nation, then of course that nation is put on spot. Now let's come to what is said about this ambush in the day of judgment. As he is in ambush here, and no wrong will be done without consequences, he is in ambush there as well. Now, I want to read something from I'tiqadat al-Saduq. This has been actually narrated. A similar thing has been narrated from Abdullah ibn Abbas in Sunni sources as well. So this is something which is shared by Sunni and Shia scholars. قال الصدوق اعتقادنا في العقبات. Our belief about aqabat. Aqabat are those uphill paths that one have to pass on the day of judgment before they can find their way to paradise. Of course, when we say uphill paths, it's all metaphorical. It's not physical. It's something that the soul has to go through to prepare, to become refined of every impurity. Because paradise is the place of purity. It is in neighborhood of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is in the realm of Indiya, that is vicinity of God. إن المتقين في جنات ونهر في مقعد صدق عند مليك مقتدر. They are in the vicinity of God. And that realm is the realm of absolute purity, which cannot be penetrated by any impurity. So if a person wants to go there, there are uphill stages, difficult stages for their purity. So قال الصدوق, Sheikh Saduq rahmatullah, in his book اعتقادنا, الاعتقادات, she agreed. It's translated into English as well. If someone wants to have a look at it, it's a very good book. She agrees. اعتقادنا في العقبات, our belief in those stages which are on the path of mahshar, on the day of resurrection. And every stage, every difficult uphill route that we have to go through has a name. And all these are on Sirat. Maybe our understanding of Sirat is like just a bridge that we have to pass over. It's not like that. It's actually the last lifeline that Allah gives to human being to go through it, to purify, to be able to be qualified for paradise. So there are stages, and the name of every stage is name of one of the obligations that man has in this world. And for example, the name of one of these stages is Salat. The name of one of these stages is Sawm. The name of one of these stages is Salatul Rahim. And then he says, when he passes through these, if he has shortcoming in these things, because these things give the perfection for entering paradise. If he has shortcoming, he's kept there. Until with the mercy of Allah, with contemplation, with reflection, he can make up for that shortcoming. So he says, وَطُولَبَ بَحَقِّ اللَّهِ فِيهَا. He will be asked about Haqqullah in that. فَإِنْ خَرَجَ مِنْهَا بِعَمَلٍ صَالِحٍ قَدَّبَهَا. If he can pass from that stage with a good and righteous act that he has sent forward, أَوْ بِرَحْمَةٍ تَدَارَكَهُ. Oh, a mercy of God that can redress that shortcoming, naja minha, will be saved from that, moves to the second aqaba, second stage, ila aqabatan ukhra. And he will be passed from one stage to another stage to another stage. If that's why you see, you hear that some people pass around very quickly, like a thunderbolt, like just a light flash. And some people move very slowly because they have to acquire what they have not acquired in this world. So he moves from one stage to another stage, and until he comes to the last stage, and that is the most important stage. وَأَحَمُّ عَقَبَةٍ مِّنْهَا الْمِرْصَادِ. The most important of that is mirsad. And this is what Allah says, إِنَّ رَبَّكَ لَبِالْمِرْصَادِ. Your Lord is standing in ambush on mirsad. And what is this mirsad? It's about the right of people. Have you wronged anyone? Whether this is a member of your family, wife, husband, children, friends, other people, strangers, people of other faiths, no matter, even animals. Even if we wrong animals, this is where we are going to be questioned. After we have passed all those stages of ibadat and worship and charity and everything, Salatul Rahim, then we are stopped here. Let me see, are you carrying any dhulm on your hand? As we have in Surah Taha, وَقَدْ خَابَ مَنْ حَمَلَ ظُلْمًا. Anyone who carries dhulm on his hand, then will be disappointed there. Because dhulm is the most polluting, which fills the human soul with its polluting quality. So when one goes to this mirsad, يقول عز وجل وعزتي وجلالي لا يجوزني ظلم ظالم. I swear by my great might and by my glory, no wrongdoing, no oppression of an oppressor, of wrongdoing, will pass from here. And as I said, this is something that you have to compensate for. And the compensation is that, as I said, you know, when we leave this world, we have certain possessions. We possess certain things. And those things are our good actions. These are our possessions. Those things are the love we have developed in our heart for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is our possession. If we have them, we are wealthy. In that world, we are very wealthy. If we don't have them, we are very poor. As Imam Ali alayhi salam said, al-faqru wal-ghina ba'da al-ard. You know how poverty and richness and wealth will be determined after your a'mal has been exposed on the day of judgment before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then it becomes known whether you are a rich person there or a poor person. And rich and poor there is not actually determined by money, wealth, things like that, by the number of, for example, bank accounts that we have here. It is by what we take with us there. Now, if we have good actions and we have wronged someone, then the person has the right to say, I want compensation for that. And the compensation is that your amal, your good amal, your charities, your worship, your cryings during the night will go to that person. And then if you are still good, if you are good enough, then you can pass. But you have become poorer and you go to a lower level in paradise. And that person becomes richer and will go to paradise in a higher level. And that's why Imam Ali alayhi salam said, يوم المظلوم على الظالم أشد من يوم الظالم على المظلوم. The day of mazloom, of the oppressed. That day is the day of oppressed, isn't it? Because that is the court of true justice. This is the court of true justice. Then that is the day of the oppressed. The day of oppressed is much severer and harder on the zalim, oppressor, than the day of oppressor over the oppressed. Here, I mean, an oppressor may wrong many people, may bomb people, may torture them, may imprison them, may kill them. Okay, that's very hard, very harsh, very severe. However, when they go there, of course, what the mazloom can inflict on zalim is much severer. So, of course, here, what is said about Inna Rabbaka Labil Mirsad is mainly in this world. However, that's very general. And that's why all exegetes, when they come to deal with this Inna Rabbaka Labil Mirsad, they have talked about the Mirsad on the day of judgment as well, which is, of course, something that Allah is very serious to endorse, to enact on people. Okay, before we go to the next verse, I think we stop here for question and answer. If there is any question, we take it and then we move to the next verse, inshallah.
If anybody has any questions, feel free to unmute yourself, or if you want to put a question in the chat box, by all means, if you want to do that, and I'll read the question out if anybody would like to do that. Sheikh Bahmanpour, just while we're waiting for any other questions, you mentioned that there are several stages on the Sirat. Mirsad is one of these. How many stages are there on this on the Sirat, towards the final judgment?
Well, some narrations say that there are 50 stages that we have to pass through. 50 aqaba. When we say stage, I give it as a translation of aqaba. Aqaba is a very hard and awkward path to pass, and that's why for those people who have not fulfilled what is required in every of these things, like salat, saum, charity, walaya, the observance of respect for the Prophet, peace be on him, the Quran, and all these things, then they are kept there. This is a stage where after which the Shafa'ah comes. It is a stage when Allah wants to keep us. Maybe if we have shortcomings, it is perfected, it is compensated for, and then we go. If we still have shortcomings, then Shafa'ah comes. So Shafa'ah comes at a very, very late stage on the day of judgment. And that's why the Imam said, be careful, Shafa'ah doesn't come early after your death. It comes at a very late stage. So all these stages, like Sirat, like Shafa'ah, are actually put there as a token of mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that we can complete what we have missed in this world. If we haven't missed anything, then of course, Sirat is just like a flash of light for us to pass. If we have shortcomings, then of course we have to wait there.
With each of these stages, is there something that we can do to help ourselves at these stages? Because we're kept there, is there something that we're actually able to do to move
in this
on?
world, you mean?
No, on the stages of this.
I don't think so. I don't think so. There, of course, the control of everything is gone from us. We don't have control of our actions anymore. Yes, we do act, we do speak, we do eat, we do drink, but the control over how our destiny will go is not in our hand anymore.
Right.
There is dua there as well, because in the Quran we have that, for example, the mu'minun will say, Rabbana atmim lana nurana wahfar lana. Oh Lord, complete our light for us and forgive us. So the dua is still there. Maybe that is something that we can do. And dua is important because it establishes a connection between the heart and between Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, especially there where dua is not just a word spoken. It is something which really comes from the heart.
I see, thank you. There's a couple of questions actually that's come on the chat box. One of them, I think maybe the writer hasn't completed the question, so if you could complete that question, I happily ask Sheikh Bahmanpour. The first question that's come in is, how could someone compensate in this world if they have wronged someone or oppressed someone in this world unknowingly?
Well, unknowingly, if we have oppressed unknowingly, by daily istighfar, by daily dua for those who have actually been wronged by us. Especially, I really advise this dua of the day of Monday, which is in Mafatihul Jalal, which talks about right of others. That, Ya Allah, if I have unknowingly or knowingly wronged someone, and now I cannot do anything about it. Perhaps the person has died, or perhaps there's nothing in my control that I can compensate for it. You compensate for me. You take care of that. And let me and the person who's wronged live with prosperity and meet you with prosperity. So this dua of the day of Monday is very good in that respect. If we have wronged people unknowingly, then Allah will compensate that for us. These are about those who wrong people knowingly. And especially when I say knowingly, because many a time we are not aware of our duties towards our spouses, for example, towards our children, towards our parents. And we do things which actually somehow suppresses their rights. And this is what we have to be very careful about. We have to learn about the way we have to treat others.
Thank you, Sheikh. The second question is, says, Salam, Sheikh, and thank you for your time this morning. Everybody has a different view of oppression. So they may say it's an oppression, but others may say not. So how can we know what actually oppression is, and how do we avoid committing this?
Well, our guideline is always Sharia. And Sharia is a good outline. Sharia tells us what is right, what is wrong. And then to take precaution in such cases is very important. It is better to be mazloom rather than zalim. This is what Imam Ali said. لأن أكون مظلوما خير لي أن أكون ظالما. If I'm oppressed, yeah, I know that, I mean, there are certain cases that oppression should be resisted. But take the example of Imam Ali alayhi salam. If he wanted to resist, what would have happened? I mean, disunity, bloodshed, and all these things. So he said, and he had the right to do it. But he said, if I'm mazloom, I'm safer than if I'm zalim. And this is especially important in family relation, I think. That even if you are mazloom in family, whether as a wife or a husband or a child or a parent, if we are mazloom and we bear and tolerate and actually put it on the account of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we do this because we are afraid of dhulm, then of course we will be amply rewarded by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Thank you. Another question that's come in. Assalamu alaikum. What if one is forced into oppression by the law of the land?
Well, anything in which we are forced to, we are not responsible for it. As we have in hadith of the Prophet, that Rufa'an ummati at-tis'a, 9 things have been removed from my ummah. It means the consequences of it. And one is ma'ukruhu ilayh, if they are forced to do something. So if they are forced to do something, then of course the oppression is not being questioned about.
Thank you, Sheikh Bahmanpour. If anybody has any other questions, if they want to unmute or type anything in the chat box at all. Okay, so I don't think there are any more questions, Sheikh Bahmanpour.
Okay, now the next verse is actually a sort of conclusion from the previous verses. فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانِ. Why people become like that? Why nations become like Ad and Samud? It's because in the nature of insan, human being, there is something which moves it towards that. Of course, except if that, if human soul is trained and controlled by faith, by akhlaq. Otherwise, insan is like this. In many verses of the Quran, we have that insan is, for example, created as a being who always is in hurry. For example, again, except if for those who have faith. Or وَالْعَصْرِ إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَفِي خُسْرٍ إِلَّا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ. Man is in loss, except. So when we say insan, we are talking about insan without faith. This is how insan is, when faith doesn't control them. So فَأَمَّا الْإِنسَانِ إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ فَأَكْرَمَهُ وَنَعَّمَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّ أَكْرَمَنِ. As for man, whenever his Lord tests him and grants him honor and blesses him, he says, my Lord has honored me. وَأَمَّا إِذَا مَا ابْتَلَاهُ وَقَدَرَ فَقَدَرَ عَلَيْهِ رِزْقَهُ فَيَقُولُ رَبِّ أَهَانَ. But when he tests him and tightens for him his provision, he says, my Lord has humiliated. Now, 2 things are very important here. First of all, giving wealth, giving ni'mah, making a person to avail of the boundaries of this world as a rich man, as a rich person, is a test, as much as poverty is a test. Both of them. As the Quran says, وَنَبْلُوهُمْ بِالشَّرِّ وَالْخَيْرِ فَتْنَةً. We test people both with shar and khair, with what is regarded to be evil and what is regarded to be good. So both of these are tests for human being. However, human being doesn't see these things. Human being, which is not a mu'min, as I said, insan here is an insan who is not bridled by the reins of faith. Whenever we give him, we dignify him, honor him, akramahu wa na'amah, and blesses him with ni'mah. What he thinks is that it is because of his special position with God. فَيَقُولُ رَبِّي أَكْرَمَنْ, my Lord has honored me, as opposed to others. Why did he honor me? Why not others? It is because I am good and others are not good. This is the quality of man. You see people when they chat with each other all the time. Well, God has given me these because I have done lots of effort, and he finds me deserving all these things, while others don't deserve it. Things like this even sometimes come to our mind. Even if we do not express it, it comes to our heart and mind that, well, if something is given to me, it's because God has honored me as opposed to others. Of course, bear in mind, whatever ni'mah is given to man is an honor from God. That's true. And that's why Allah says, إِذَا مَبْتَلَاهُ رَبُّهُ, his Lord, again, take notice of the word Rabb. His Lord tests him and honors him. So giving ni'mah is an honor. Then when we turn this ni'mah as a means for disobeying God, for oppression, for other evil qualities, we turn it to misery. Otherwise, it is, of course, honor. However, if we say Allah has honored me as against others, then that's wrong. That's what this verse is saying. Yes, if we say Allah has honored me with faith, as opposed to those who haven't faith, that is very good. If we say that, for example, Allah has honored me in my heart to be humble, as opposed to others, that's an honor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All these are very good. However, if we think that honor is only in riches of this world, this is what the verse is describing. So when we give him these ni'mah, he thinks that he is especially being honored and has respect with us, and therefore he can do whatever he wants. Look at the President of the United States always talking about God having favor on him. This is how people actually think about themselves when they are given without account. And as a consequence, they rebel. Man rebels when they see that they are not in need, they are needless, they have lots of wealth, and they think that they are chosen by God for that. And then, on the other hand, this insan who is empty of faith, when we test him and tighten his life, then he thinks that Allah has actually some animosity with him, has humiliated him. So the criterion for humility and honor here for these people are the riches of this world. And this is what, if you go through Nahj al-Balagha, you see how Imam Ali warns people. This is a plague which penetrates into the heart of everyone. As he says in one of the khutbahs in Nahj al-Balagha, فَلَا تَعْتَبِرُ الرِّضَى وَالسُّخْطِ بِالْمَالِ وَالْوَلَدِ. Do not consider pleasure of God or his wrath with what he has given you in terms of riches, numbers, children. No, this is not the case. And then he gives examples. The example of Pharaoh, that what Allah had given him. And the example of prophets, how they were deprived of this world. He gives the example of Prophet Jesus alayhi salam, that's how he didn't even have a house for himself. Prophet Moses, peace be on him, that he was eating from the grass while he was traveling to Madian, that his color became green because he didn't have anything else. And he gives the example of Prophet Muhammad, peace be on him, that he died while he was hungry and he didn't have anything to eat. And he used to tie a stone on his stomach to somehow reduce the pain and pangs of hunger. So then he says, after giving these different examples, he says, فَلَا تَعْتَبِرُوا الرِّضَى وَالسُّخْطِ بِالْمَالِ وَالْبَنِينَ. Do not consider the wrath and pleasure of Allah with these things. But a person who is not a believer has such an idea in the mind. When we test him, again, it's the idea of test is very important, that all these are tests from Allah. When you test him and grants him honor and blesses him, he says, my Lord has honored me. And when we test him and tighten for him his provision, he says, my Lord has humiliated me. This is the point of rebellion. That if we think that it is something that Allah has given us, we are better than others, so we can actually oppress others. And even accepting oppression comes from this mindset that, well, God hasn't given us anything. We don't have even a star in all skies. And therefore, this is our lot in this world. So both oppression and acceptance of oppression comes from this mindset. Now, the Quran rejects this categorically. That's the criterion for honor and humility and humiliation, for honoring and humiliation, are not these things. The criterion is your actions, which you do not have. So the next verse says, Kalla, is not the case. Neither the honoring nor humiliating are because of these things, are because of what you find in the worldly gains. Kalla, bal la tukrimun al-yatim. You are humiliated because of your action. Now here, it doesn't talk about honoring, because this is a verse, this is a surah which is leading to what consequences the people like Ad and Samud will get on the day of judgment. Apart from the punishment that they had in this world, what they get on the day of judgment as well. So it's not the case that God has humiliated you because he hasn't given you wealth. Actually, you are humiliated because you are given those things. Although they are means of honoring a ni'mah, and Allah has honored you with that, but you have converted that to a means of humiliation. Why? Because you do not honor the orphan. This is very, very strange. I mean, among all the wrongdoings of the world that Allah can count here, the first thing that he says is yatim. Why? Because yatim is the most defenseless of all in society, especially in past societies. Nowadays, of course, the governments look after yatim, but in old societies, he or she was the most defenseless. And that's why, especially about orphan girls, the Quran is very sensitive. Yatam al-Nisa. Allah gives you orders with regards to orphan girls, because they were, of course, taken advantage of very much. So the first thing that Allah mentions, why you are humiliated, because kalla bal la tukramun al-yatim. Rather, you do not honor the orphan. Despite Allah honoring you with his ni'mah, you do not honor the orphan. You do not respond to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given you. And then the next thing, وَلَا تَحَاضُّونَ عَلَىٰ طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ, and do not urge the feeding of the needy. Here is very interesting. Allah doesn't talk about anything in relation to himself. That you do not worship, you do not pray, you do not fast. No, those things come after. After you have done these, then those things find importance. If you do those things and you are careless about these things, they are all in vain. But if you do these, then of course we come to talk about other matters here. So, وَلَا تَعَضُونَ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. Interestingly, what we have in hadith is that what we meet in barzakh is not only for Muslims, it's for all human beings. What we meet in barzakh and our place there is mainly determined by the way we interact with people, rather than the way we interact with God. That is for later on. That's for later stage of resurrection. But the way we interact with people, especially with vulnerable people, with the orphan, with the poor, that is when the main test comes. And it is intertwined with our relation with God. If we have not overcome these barriers, the barrier of standing that on our way is oppression of a yatim, or being careless about the yatim and orphan, or being careless about food of people. And this is not something which is about Muslims. The address is to the mushrikun of Mecca, isn't it? So it's clear that these are duties towards every human being. It's not the duty towards only Muslims. Every human being who is in this state should be cared for, looked after. There's a very interesting story about a lady who was called Zainab, and was a mushrik, of course, before the Prophet was appointed, but she was a very nice lady, feeding the poor, looking after the orphans in Mecca. And after the Prophet, of course, was appointed, she converted to Islam. She was a very rich woman, an old woman, actually. She migrated to Medina. And when she migrated to Medina, she was very poor. She had left all her wealth in Mecca. Because of what she used to do in Mecca, looking after orphans and the poor, the Prophet honored her by marrying her. And after that marriage, of course, I think she passed away after 2 months because she was very old. But Prophet honored her because of she honoring the orphan and the poor in Mecca. Now, about feeding the poor, there are smashing verses in the Quran. Look, I have just chosen one example from Surah Al-Muddathir. كُلُّ نَفْسٍ بِمَا كَسَبَتْ رَهِينٌ. Every man is hostage of their actions. إِلَّا أَصْحَابَ الْيَمِينِ. Except people of the right. Why? Because people of the right, now that they are in paradise, they are free from any consequences. Allah has forgiven it, compensated for it, and it's all finished. They are not hostage of their actions anymore. But people in the hell, yes, they are hostage to their actions. كل نفس بما كسبت رهينة إلا أصحاب اليمين في جنات. Okay, they are free from their sometimes evil acts now. They are not any more hostage of those acts, and they are in gardens. They converse with mujrimun who are in hell. One of the interesting things that the Quran mentions all the time is that there is a conversation between people of paradise and people of hell. And it is mentioned in Surah Safat as well. It's mentioned here. How that happens, we don't know. Do we need language there? We don't know. Is it just mind to mind, heart to heart, and distance, even realms would not stop people to communicate with each other. So people of paradise can talk to people of hell. في جنات يتساءلون عن المجرمين. They question the criminals. ما سلككم في سقر? What led you to Saqar, which is one of the darkest places in hell? Maybe the question is because of this, that we were sinners as well. We had done wrongs. We had wronged ourselves as well. But God forgave us. We came to paradise. We are here. But why are you there? Why were you not forgiven? Why your sins were not given, compensated by maghfirah of Allah? ما سلككم في سقر قالوا لم نكن من المصلين. First of all, we had no relation with God. Salat initially literally means connection. And here salat, it doesn't mean salat of Muslimun only. Any salat. لم نكن من المصلين. We had no relation. Is that all? No. ولم نكن نطعم المسكين. We were not feeding the poor. We were not caring about the people. We were not caring about God. We were not caring about the people. وكنا نخوض مع الخائضين. We wasted our life by just indulging with those who indulge in vain and useless talk. You know, sometimes we, even our literature, the books that we read, what we listen daily from TV are just this holes in battle, useless chat. And وَكُنَّا نُكَذِّبُ بِيَوْمِ الدِّينِ, did not believe anything in day of judgment. حَتَّى أَتَانَا الْيَقِينَ, until death came to us. So we were in that stage, even if one day before our death, we would have realized, we could have compensated for all that. But we did it until death came. حَتَّى أَتَانَا الْيَقِينَ. And then God says, فَمَا تَنْفَعُهُمْ شَفَاعَةُ الشَّافِعِينَ. There are those who intercede on that day, but their intercession would not benefit these. Why? Because of those qualities. So intercession is something which needs something in some quality in the person who's being interceded for. If those qualities are not there, then of course, how are the intercessors going to do anything about it? فَمَا تَنْفَعُهُمْ شَفَاعَةُ الشَّافِعِينَ. So, feeding the poor, كَلَّا بَلْ لَا تُكْرِمُونَ الْيَتِيمَ. You know why you are humiliated? Why you have such an attitude? Because you do not care, you do not honor the orphan. And one very interesting thing which is here is not just caring for, it's just not feeding the orphan, it's honoring them, giving things to, looking after them with karama, with honor. And that's the most important. The same way we honor our own children. We don't just throw food before them to eat. No, they are the dearest. They are most honored in our heart. So first of all, you should honor the orphan. Secondly, وَلَا تَعَرْضُونَ عَلَى طَعَامِ الْمِسْكِينِ. Thirdly, وَتَأْكُلُونَ التُّرَاثَ أَكْلًا لَمًّا. You don't care about the rights of others. You eat the inheritance rapaciously. Lam means to jama, to bring together. You bring the right of others and yourself in one place and oppress them by not giving their rights. And this happens in our society, unfortunately. We see this in many Muslim families as well, that they do not care about the shares that Allah has determined for every member of the deceased family, for boys, for girls, for spouses, for parents, and then after them the second category. So you don't care about that. And unfortunately, this we can see very widespread. وَتَأْكُلُونَ التُّرَاثَ أَكْلًا لَمًّا وَتُحِبُّونَ الْمَالَ حُبًّا جَمًّا. And you love wealth with much fondness. Jam means amply, very eagerly. You love of course, mal or wealth is something good if we use it as a means. But if we love it, then it means that it is an end for us. تُحِبُّونَ الْمَالَ. You love wealth. Not that you just look at it as a means for life, as a means for your own sustenance and sustenance on others as well, but you love it. And when you love it, of course, you are attached to it. And when you are attached to it, you do not give rights of others, or you do not help others. These are the qualities of insan when they are not controlled by faith, by akhlaq. And when I talk about faith, it's faith in any society, any community, any nation. Because every nation have some standards of akhlaq that they have to follow. But people who do not care about these things are those who need such consequences, which were mentioned above. وَتُحِبُّونَ الْمَالَ حُبًّا جَمًّا كَلَّا. Things will not go the way you think. Kalla is for negation of imagination, understanding, news. إِذَا دُكَّتِ الْأَرْضُ دَكًّا دَكًّا. When the earth is pounded and leveled to a plain. So we are now moving from this world, we are now moving to the consequences which will be met on the day of judgment. Inshallah, we leave this for our next session. وصلى الله على محمد وعلى الطاهرين. I'm here for questions if there are any.
So if anybody has any questions, please feel free to unmute yourselves or to type a question in the chat box, please. Okay, so we have a question. Would you say that the main qualities in the pharaonic Thamud and Ad leadership was their lack of Tawheed, coupled with not actually understanding the owner of Ni'mat, or was only due to poor akhlaq and losing control over lowly desires? For example, as mentioned in this chapter, violating the rights of orphans, love of wealth and negligence to the poor, or purely the rejection of the miracle of the Prophet at the time, which led to the entire community's punishment?
You know, it's a conglomeration of all these things. People don't come to that state of oppression all at once. It goes generation after generation, and people. I always look at the United States of America. Initially, it was a sort of a country which was after freedom, a country which would have liked to help others for freedom, a country which did not like to oppress. But as wealth accumulated, then this rebellion started. And now we can see an instance of Pharaoh and Ad and Samud in that nation. It's not just one person, it's a nation. You see, anywhere in the world, where there is a war, you see a trace of that nation. You see that wars are being triggered by them. This is an example. I mean, they didn't come to that position overnight. The same with Pharaoh, the same with Ad, the same with Thamud. And therefore, these qualities, when they accumulate, they lead a person and a nation to be like that.
Thank you, Sheikh. Any other questions? If anybody wants to unmute or type a question in the chat box at all. Just one quick question while we're waiting for somebody anybody else to ask a question, is that these verses are for the mu'mineen to understand the stages that, as you mentioned, on the sirat. What about those people of no faith at all? Not people who have other faith, but of no faith at all. What will be their outcome or situation on this sirat?
Well, every human being will pass on the sirat. However, if we look at this, the whole surah, we see that this is not addressed at mu'mineen at all. It's addressed at mushrikeen. It is actually invoking something in the fitra of human being. It is not something specific to those who believe. Of course, those who do not believe in it or do not believe in God, they reject it. Just like those who said, "Lam nakum al musallin, wa kunna nukadhibu bi yawm al-din." We just didn't care about Day of Judgment or things like that. Now, when we talk about the fate of other people, whether people of other faiths or people of no faith, then we have certain categories which are talked about in our narrations and also in the Quran. We have a group of, a large group of people who are called mustaz'afin. Mustaz'afin not in their worldly life, mustaz'af in the sense that they have no access to guidance, no meaningful access. I mean, that's very important because sometimes we say that, okay, there's access, they see TV, they read books. No meaningful access to guidance. These people, of course, are not dealt like those who have received guidance and have rejected it, or have received guidance and has distorted it. They actually meet a more severe consequences than those who have not received any guidance. What we have been told about those who have not received guidance or mustaz'afin is that they will be saved. Salvation is there for them. However, of course, salvation has degrees. It doesn't mean that, say for example, I as a person, inshallah, I'm saved and go to paradise. And a person who prays Salatul Layl every night, a person who is working for people every day, go to paradise as well. But the level of our salvation, where we go, is very different. The same thing about people of other faiths as well. For example, people who believe in Trinity and Christianity, but it doesn't strike their mind that maybe Islam is a better religion. They always have thought, they have been educated in that way, they have thought that our faith is the best faith. And then they finish their life in that thought and they die. What will happen? Will they go to hell? Of course not. This is not fair. This is not justice of Allah. But they receive that level of salvation which Christianity could give to them. What we believe is that Islam, especially the path of Ahlul Bayt, can give us the highest level of salvation if we follow it. It's not about names. That's very important. It's not about names. That my name is Muslim or other people are called Jews, Christians, or others. No. Based on how much we have followed, we may receive a better salvation than others.
Thank you, Sheikh. Another question that's come in. These days, it is difficult to ascertain who are the needy and who are presenting to be needy. Do we need to find out ourselves, or is it enough to take care of anyone who says they are needy?
Well, in the Quran, we have two titles. وَفِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ حَقٌّ لِلسَّائِلِ وَالْمَحْرُومِ. In their wealth, there is a right for sa'il, those who asks, and mahroom, those who is deprived but doesn't ask. So the question was asked from Imam As-Sadiq alayhi salam as well, that sometimes the beggars come and ask us things, and we don't know whether they are in need or not. Imam said, give them something small if you are not sure whether they are in need or not, so that you have not rejected the sa'il. But, you know, we are not in charge of the whole wealth of this world. So maybe we need to prioritize, even if we want to spend our money in charity. We really look, before people asking, we look who is in need, and we try to fulfill those needs. This is what many charities are doing these days. I know there are many charities here in Iran. They really, before people ask or anything, they go, they do research, investigate, find out who may be in need, and then they help them without them even asking or even knowing about it.
I see, thank you. Anybody else has any questions at all? If you want to unmute or type anything in the chat box, we have maybe just another couple more minutes if anybody wants to ask a question at all. Anybody else wants to ask a question or type anything at all? So I think there's a question coming in. I'm not sure. I thought I saw a question come in, but I can't. Also, sorry, the question here is, also the inheritance of orphans seems to be highlighted not just in this chapter, but in others too. What is the significance as inheritance of orphans is not encountered often these days?
Well, it is mentioned because, as I said, the orphans, because of their age and because of their vulnerability, were not able, and even today are not able to seek their due rights. And the grown-ups may oppress them with their rights in inheritance. And that is why it has become so important and has boldened in the Quran. As I said, especially orphan girls are very much mentioned in the Quran at the beginning of Surah Nisa, in the middle of the Surah Nisa, and in other verses, that their rights have to be observed, they should not be taken advantage of, and things like that.
Ahsan. Thank you, Sheikh Bahmanpour. And that brings the end to today's session. We're out of time again, unfortunately. Thank you again, Sheikh Bahmanpour, for an excellent session today. And thank you, everybody, for joining us. And inshallah, we will continue the series and meet again next Sunday, inshallah.
Inshallah, thank you very much. And thanks, everyone, for listening. Bi aman Allah, Khuda Hafiz.
Khuda Hafiz, Sheikh.